So I'm not sure if anyone's aware of this, but I've actually played a lot of trading card games other than Magic the Gathering. I know, right? And here you thought I was a nerd. For every card game that stands up to the test of time, though, there's probably like 10 of them that fall to the wayside, at least. I want to talk about those games. Alright, so let me take you back to the year 1999. The only card game to have come out and truly thrived was the very first one from 1993, Magic the Gathering. There were plenty of others that tried, and don't worry, I'll get to plenty of them and a mayhem. But we finally get another success in the form of a licensed trading card game, Pokemon. To be fair, the success of the Pokemon TCG was pretty inevitable. It was the biggest thing in the world, so it's no surprise that anything with that fucking logo was going to go gangbusters. It also helped that the game itself was made by Wizards of the Coast, who, unlike at the beginning of Magic the Gathering's history, actually knew what they were doing. The rules were well balanced, and in spite of some printing errors, it was easy to figure out how to play if you happen to be interested in doing so. So clearly, if there were another huge license that everyone loved, then it would be a guaranteed success, right? You might be surprised to learn just how true that is. Dragon Ball Z is a franchise that both seems perfect for a TCG and also terrible for a TCG. On one hand, most TCGs are contested in 1 versus 1 games, which makes perfect sense for the crazy one-on-one fights held in DBZ. Not that it would be out of place to also have group rules. On the other hand, the way that power levels work in DBZ means that there would be a power creep that would be damn near avoidable unless you designed it with that in mind from the beginning. We'll get to that power creep thing later, but let's just say that one fledgling company, Score Entertainment, decided to grab the license and go for it. Well, I say fledgling, but much like some companies that would enter the TCG market, such as Upper Deck, they were known for years for sports trading cards before now. So they already had the trading and card part of a TCG down. There was one small problem, though. Score doesn't know how to make games. Believe me, this isn't going to be the last time that Score comes up when talking about failed card games. But let's just say that Dragon Ball Z was probably their only actual success. As we go along, I'll get into the real reason why, but first, let's talk about the basic rules of the game that Score made. I'll be honest, there's a lot to the basic function of the game that's pretty interesting. A deck requires 50 to 85 cards, which doubles your life total, since damage is dealt to you by putting cards from the top of your deck into the graveyard. The upside to this is that it creates a balancing act. You can make your deck more consistent at the cost of not being as durable, or you can be more durable, but perhaps not always have the cards you want because you have to put more cards in your deck to do that. It's a good way to encourage variable deck sizes that nobody would really come close to until Yu-Gi-Oh! Introduced the card, That Grass Looks Greener. But on the other hand, it creates a potential snowball effect to dealing damage to people since you take away options as you deal damage to them. This has the potential to allow someone to run over their opponent too easily, thus making games a little bit too one-sided. The other central mechanic is the power level mechanic. On the side of all the character cards is a set of 10 numbers referred to as power level. The game comes with this little plastic scouter thing for you to keep track of which power level your character is on. Some attacks damage these power stages first, and energy attacks would typically cost power stages to perform. You'd recover this naturally every single turn. This I wouldn't have a problem for if not for how physical attacks are handled. Physical attacks use this table to determine how many power stages of damage you take by default. Remember that snowball effect I was talking about earlier? Yeah, this really doesn't help that at all. If you're at the bottom power stage, 0, you start taking life cards instead of power stages, adding to the fact that once a person gets an advantage, it's hard to come back without some really good comeback cards. Granted, it's not like the game doesn't have them. Even the first set had cards like Vegeta's Energy Blast, which is a Saiyan power-up. Does that mean only Saiyans can use it? Okay, to be fair, it works better than the normal wording for Saiyan Heritage only from the Saiyan Saga, which would be outmoded in the very next set. Did they not think they'd get to make a second set or something? And I guess this has like special timing or some shit. You like play it as a defense? What? Okay, can I just discuss how horribly worded some of the Saiyan Saga cards are? Look, I wouldn't normally judge a game from this time period for this, since a lot of games have wording issues in the first set. But god damn, was the wording terrible. Like even the people who really are still into the game think that the wording on Saiyan Saga cards are awful. Let me give you a few of the gems from my collection. Trust me, this is going to be funny. Plant 2 Cyberman. A villain may plant this card instead of combat. Okay, plant this card. On his next turn, he takes his highest level Cyberman and puts it into play as an ally. Discard this card from the game after use. In other words, remove from play. Alright, so 2 questions. First of all, where am I taking the Cyberman from? Do I have to have them in my hand? I doubt it, since it wouldn't be worth the trouble. The errata does clarify that I'm getting my highest level Cyberman from the deck or the discard pile, but I have another question. Why the fuck is it called Plant 2 Cyberman when I only get 1? Goku's surprise attack. Physical attack, striking out for 5 stages of damage on a selected foe. Okay, so this probably doesn't sound so bad until you realize that the striking out wording here isn't used anywhere else. And the selected foe part makes it sound like you can choose to attack allies with it if you want. When, according to the errata, you can't. An example of terrible wording making a card able to do something it shouldn't be able to do. Gohan's physical attack. Physical attack. Gohan gains 1 anger level. Increase Gohan's power rating by 5 stages. On top of how inconsistent the grammar has a tendency to be, which leads to confusion in card design, you get these effects if you're not Gohan. Well, since I'm here discussing anger, I may as well discuss the other ways to win. Dragon Ball victory is pretty simple. Have all 7 of one of the sets of Dragon Balls on the field. Okay, to be fair, this was pretty hard since you could only have 1 of each Dragon Ball in your deck as of the Trunks saga. During the Saiyan saga and the Frieza saga, however, Dragon Balls were just one of the many one-turn victory decks around. What about that anger stuff I was talking about? See, that was for most powerful personality victory, which you achieved by reaching the highest personality level among players in the game. See, some cards let you gain anger, and as soon as you had 5 anger, you would go up to the next level card among your main personality cards. You only had to have levels 1 through 3, and they were set off to the side. But in the first set, you could go to level 4 if you had the level 4 card. That would also be set off to the side. The maximum MP level would go up over time as the game got further along. And it wouldn't be the only thing, but this meant that essentially, if you weren't playing the most pushed characters in the most recent set, in a tournament you probably couldn't get a most powerful personality victory, since if your opponent had a level higher than you, you were locked out of that victory condition. You also couldn't get a survival victory, but that wasn't really because you were literally locked out of being able to deck your opponent. It was because of the whole power creep thing I was talking about. So remember those power stages? The numbers on those power stages would get higher and higher the further they went into game. To accommodate those higher numbers, the physical attack table would also change with mostly every set. They especially made sure to learn this after the Frieza saga when Guldo, a card that probably shouldn't be stronger than Goku, was kicking Goku's ass. Like seriously, there were weaker enemies who were really going after people who were the main characters because the main characters didn't get new cards. What this really ended up meaning for the overall health of the game, though, is that by the time the next set after you got your main personality came out, your main personality was most likely going to be completely overpowered by the new main personality cards. The Trunks saga was really the tipping point for the game when Score got some of their shit together. Some rules changes, more attention to card balance, and a classic example of learning from past mistakes. Something not every card game gets the luxury of doing. The problem with this game at this point, though, was the tendency it had to break itself. From Tapkar, and yes, for you Dragon Ball fans, I do mean that Tapkar, to Piccolo the Trained, to Freestyle Goku, and the dreaded carpet attack technique, the game was broken beyond reason at pretty much every point after the Cell Saga. The thing that really killed this game was the change to Dragon Ball GT. Believe it or not, it's not because the game was bad, and also, believe it or not, it's not because they changed the card back. They did change the card back, and later episodes of this series are going to show you don't change the fucking card back, because that will get you killed. In fact, what I'd say about the GT card game was that it was the best thing to happen in regards to the Dragon Ball GT series. So what was it that actually killed the game if it wasn't even the cardinal sin of changing the card back? Seriously, don't fucking do it! Well, the fact that GT's show sucks so much was the death of the game. Score would go on to try to make a new DBZ game that wasn't compatible with the old one, but the fans would continue playing the old game either online or in smaller scale tournaments. If you'd like more information about the current DBZ CCG scene, Score Z scene as it were, I'll be linking to the Retro DBZ CCG community website in the description. That's not the end of the story either, though. In 2009, Score's parent company, Donruss, was bought out by another trading card game company called Panini. One of the things they got the rights to was the Dragonball Z CCG, which they revived with a few changes to how it worked. The first change was the split between main personalities and allies. In the original game, your allies just had to be 2 levels below the highest level of your main personality, which was a slightly confusing mechanic, admittedly. I think being unafraid to restrict people was good here because it was for the betterment of focused card design and preventing stuff like, oops, Tapkar's broken, guys! The second major change is how most powerful personality victory works, and it encompasses multiple large-scale changes. First of all, every main personality has exactly 4 levels, so no more lockout because your MP never got a level 6. Second, to allow you to actually use your 4th level if you want, the win condition is now reach 5 anger while you're at level 4. There are also cards that allow you to move to a higher personality at the cost of locking you out of most powerful personality victory, by way of card effect, for those who are after a particular level for their strategy. Masteries, one of the codifying additions to the original game, are now a requirement. To be fair, they were pretty much a requirement before, too. This is one of the carryover components from the GT CCG. Cards that are named after a character can now only be used in that character's deck, creating a more succinct fighting game feel and making less powerful MPs like Master Roshi have more power through the use of their personal strategies. Finally, and this is the biggest thing, a unified physical attack table. They've designed the game around the characters having access to the same physical attack table through every set, clearly learning from the issues that the original game faced. Power levels now translate directly into numerical values, or rather letter values that tell you where in the chart to go. Although I personally think it would work just as well to simply use the letter grades, but I'm not really going to argue flavor on this front, especially since the attack table is consulted less often than it was before, in addition to being a little bit simpler and a little bit easier to balance because of the fact that you're not changing it all the time. Sadly, this particular game didn't get to the end of the Dragon Ball Z series, only reaching about the end of the Cell Saga with their Awakening set. It wasn't due to a lack of financial success or player interest like with GT though. Panini chose to sunset the game with a final ban list and everything that I believe is still being worked on as of the recording of this video, because Bandai was making their own Dragon Ball Super card game. You could probably argue that Bandai was after reduced competition and asked them to stop, but Panini didn't have to say yes. I think the fact of the matter is that both companies determined that the franchise competing with itself would be a bad idea, something that perhaps some other franchises could learn from. The Panini DBZ game, dubbed Pan-Z by many fans, is continuing through Pan support in much the same way that Score Z has continued support through Retro DBZ. I'll provide a link to Fan-Z, the continuation of Pan-Z, get it, in the description. I'll also provide a link to the Twitter page of the new gaming division of Panini that was formed after the success of Pan-Z. We'll have to see what happens with Panini's next project, Meta X, and with Bandai's Dragon Ball Super card game, but for now, let's talk about what really happened here. This is a game that should have never gotten off the ground and shouldn't have been able to keep the support it did, because despite the revisions in the Trunks saga to the game system, the card design itself remained problematic throughout its run. And I think the lack of interest in GT, especially in the case of its focused format, which was only GT cards, showed just how poorly Score did in designing a game that was engaging outside of a few great sets. It was kept alive by this amount of care put in during the middle portion of its run, but what I can only guess is a lack of proper playtesting during Z and the restrained card design of GT are ultimately what dragged the game down. This is probably the most positive I'm going to be with one of these dead games, by the way. And definitely the most positive I tend to be towards Score.